Great stuff.
Paula said she got spam in an email, and I thought, how did they send this by email? Everybody know what that is, I guess?
Yeah.
I'm going to guess, just off the top of my head, that there are different feelings towards spam. When I was a kid, about once a week, we had spam for our meat with the meal. That was it. I happen to love spam. And if you're a spam lover, God bless you. But I know not everybody is a spam lover. Don't ask me how, but it has come up a couple of times while I'm driving people to and from. I don't know why it does, but it does. And I have had reactions from, "Oh, you would eat that?" I'd say, yes, I'd make a sandwich out of it, and while I'm waiting for the sandwich to be finished, I'll cut a slice to munch on while I'm waiting. I love spam. And people say, I hate spam. You don't know what goes into that thing. I said, it's kind of like hot dogs, isn't it? You don't know what goes in there either, but you eat hot dogs in all likelihood. But anyway, why are you showing us spam? I can't remember. Paul, did you remember why?
Check your notes.
Yeah, let me look in my notes.
You didn't tell me.
No, I didn't tell you. Because how could there be that wide a divergence of attitude or feelings towards spam? I mean, how can some people say it's so good, and some people say, I wouldn't eat that if you paid me? I don't know why. Do you know that in Hawaii, they go crazy over spam? And in the Philippines, we happen to partially support a couple of boys in the Philippines. What they want for Christmas? Spam! The organization that brought us to taking care of these two boys is an organization that goes to Costco and buys pallets of spam and sends it over to the Philippines so they can have a real Christmas. I think we should try that this year. Are we having turkey or ham? Spam.
You know where the Spam Museum is?
Is it near where you landed that airplane?
It's Austin, Minnesota.
Austin, Minnesota.
Been there.
The Spam Museum. The Spam Museum.
Yes.
Exactly right.
Paul, we were in Minnesota this summer. Why didn't you tell me about it?
Maybe Austin is weird there too.
Maybe. So, even though there's a wide divergence of feelings and attitudes towards spam, I have noticed that nobody gets on Facebook or TikTok and says about spam eaters, you guys are gross. Or people who are non-spam eaters, you don't know what you're missing, you're so stupid. Because it's not that important to us. Nobody writes this or that about spam. But people write this or that about other things. I want you to listen very carefully to what I say. It's going to be on video, so you can't say I said this or that when I didn't. Okay? Last Wednesday, when Paul and I arrived, we had a busy afternoon, and then we went to a small group meeting at 4 o'clock. Then we went out to eat with a small group, and when I arrived here, there were people who were just in tears over the loss of a young man who was kind of a hero to the conservative movement. And it just broke my heart when I heard about it. But you know what? I've had my heart broken by a number of things along that line. When that husband and wife were gunned down in their home because she was a Democrat in Minnesota, I didn't hear much from y'all about that. But that's awful. And then, we are quick to say, oh, it's that crazy radical left that's trying to ruin our country. No, it's the right-wing, gun-wielding people that are no good and stupid, and here it comes. And people unload on one another. Do you know there are people in this group, listen carefully, there are people in this group who think that Donald Trump is the guy most likely to get us back to our Christian heritage and roots and make the country wonderful again. And then there are people in this class who believe that Donald Trump is the closest thing to the Antichrist that has ever hit our nation. And you know what's amazing about that? They're all Christians. They all read the same book. How could people be so divergent in their thoughts about things like that? I remember when the assassination plot on his life and just nearly killed him. And I read on the internet, I just wish he'd have been a better shot. And you think, wow. When Nancy Pelosi's husband was beaten with a hammer, I heard people laugh and say that they wished they'd waited till Nancy got home. That's the condition of our country right now. And I'm sad about it. And nearly every time something like that happens, I've got notes. I hear leaders, political leaders. Tim Johnson was the last one that I heard say this. This has got to stop. This is not who we are. You know what I found? Two things. Saying this has got to stop doesn't stop anything. What does that mean? This has got to stop. Well, it doesn't. This is not who we are. People, this is who we are. This is who we've become, unfortunately, because it's going on over and over again. And it's not unusual to hear, well, there were 3 high school kids shot today, one of them's dead and 2 are in the hospital. Well, that's not who we are. Yes, it is. It's who we've become, unfortunately. I have no idea what the countrywide solution is. It would be stupid for me to say that I did. I don't. But maybe as a class, we could think it through and maybe tone down the rhetoric. I'm talking about whether you're on social media or in private conversations, we've got to quit being part of the problem. It begins with me. I've been known to make snide remarks on TikTok. Paula would never do that. So I have to do it when she's not looking. There's something in me that just makes me do that. I never talk about how great Spam is and what's wrong with you people who don't eat it. But I'm willing to jump in there in politics and say some incredibly weird things sometimes. And we're all followers of Jesus. I don't know if you heard this, but shortly after the death of Charlie Kirk, the governor of Utah, who is a Republican, said, this is close. I'm not saying this is word for word. Charlie Kirk's death bothers me because he was such an effective communicator of conservative values, but it bothers me more that he was an American. In other words, we're shooting each other. So I don't have a national solution, but just look inside yourself. We don't have to say anybody who follows that is just an idiot, or they're trying to. I've heard this. They're trying to destroy our country because they hate our country. No, they don't. They just see it differently. Nobody's trying to destroy our country like this. I really don't. Oh, I'm not saying the guy who shot Charlie Kirk. I don't know, but I'm talking about in general. They don't hold these ideas because they're trying to destroy our country that they hate. they love the country, but they see it differently. And the outlet for that, many times, is in social media, private conversations, or we just feel like we can say anything we want to and get away with it. Let's not be part of that. As Forrest Gump once said, that's all I've got to say about that. And if you want to come and talk to me after class about that, I'm certainly willing for you to do that. My wife's not yelling at me, so it's okay. Okay, so last week we looked at one verse in 1 Kings chapter 17. If you brought a Bible, I'm actually going to be reading the text from the Bible. I don't always do that, but I'm going to be reading the text. Paul noted that we only have 3/4 of a page of notes, so obviously the lesson's going to end early. He's so easily misguided about things like that. Yes, ma'am.
Are you finished?
I'm sorry.
The notes?
Anybody need notes?
Does Paul only have a?
No.
Oh, okay.
We-
Oh, I see.
It's only 3/4 of the
Okay.
page.
I thought I gave him a wrong copy.
What we have here is failure to communicate. One of the great lines. Anyway. So, Elijah comes out of nowhere and finds himself standing in the presence of Ahab the king, the pagan, idolatrous king. And he says, by the word of the Lord in whose presence I stand. You remember that? Not whom I serve, but whose presence I stand. Yeah, I'm standing in front of you, but more than that, I'm standing in front of God. It is not going to rain until I say so. Then we read beginning in verse 2. Then the word of the Lord came to Elijah, leave here. Okay, leave here. Turn eastward and hide in the ravine of Kerith, east of the Jordan. You will drink from the brook, and I have ordered the ravens to feed you there. So he did what the Lord had told him. He went to the ravine of Kerith, east of the Jordan, and stayed there. The ravens brought him bread and meat in the morning, and bread and meat in the evening, and he drank from the brook. Anybody reading from the Message? I think the bread and meat is in the Message is donuts and bacon, if I'm not mistaken. No, oh, it's not. Okay, no, I just totally made that up. The first thing I noticed is that God tells Elijah one idea at a time. I want you to go stand before King Ahab. So he does what he's supposed to do. Then the word of the Lord says, oh, and now you better get out of town. Go east of the Jordan to the ravine Cherith or Kerith, the brook. It appears in different translations. Imagine a very steep-walled place like a canyon where the river or brook runs through it. And it's headed from the mountains east of the Jordan. The spam just landed on my foot and got its revenge. I said good words about you. I don't understand why you're attacking me. And there he said, you can drink from the brook, and I will send ravens to take care of you. Is that the best way? Some of you probably noticed right off, hey, wait a minute, ravens? Doesn't Leviticus 11 tell us that ravens are unclean? They are, the text says, an abomination. Have you ever eaten raven? Turkey, yes. Raven, no. Okay? And I don't know how the ravens, was there 2 ravens? Was there 20 ravens? But twice a day, they showed up with bread in their beaks, in their talons. There's no explanation. Did they land down there and give it to him, or did they drop it out of the sky? I don't know. But I'm guessing that he knew that these ravens were unclean birds, but somehow the food would not be considered unclean. Now, I'm going to make a point here that probably doesn't arise out of the text, but that doesn't always bother me. In the last year, there have been a couple of pastors from very large churches who were let go because of moral weakness, sexual sins, call it what you will. And for the people who have gone to church there, and I've talked with several of them, it really took the wind out of their sails. The thing that upsets me the most is that gives fodder to the critics. You see, church, look at what they did. I hate it especially for that reason. But I want to suggest something to you. That if you went to church at these places and heard messages of inspiration, of encouragement, of comfort, and of faith, the message is from God, and it is not affected by the sin of the one who delivered the message. Are you with me on that? I mean, unclean ravens brought him food, but the food was from God, so the food is fine. And the food that the people received at those churches is a message from God, and so it's fine. My heart breaks for those men and the folks who are most upset by it. But it is what it is. And so, if you ever find out or already know that I have feet of clay, I want you to know that the messages that I'm bringing to you are from the Word of God. And so, don't say, well, I thought that would be true, but it came from Don, and you know what his problem is. Or problems are. Paula, just settle down. I just wanted to make that point. I don't know how long this lasted. How long that he was out there. But there's not a whole lot of foot traffic that comes through there. He may have gone weeks, months, without even seeing anybody. And why did he go? Well, some would say, well, it's obvious. God's protecting him from Ahab and Jezebel. And that may be true. But what I noticed is that the next time Elijah stands in front of Ahab, Ahab doesn't try to kill him. Ahab listens to what he has to say. He doesn't seem so much to be in danger with Ahab. Why else would he go out there? I know some of you know. God has a lot of things in mind for this prophet. He's going to do amazing things. He is going to, in many ways, turn the country around. But he'd better have a solid relationship with his God when he's doing that. And I believe that that time of isolation in the ravine or by the brook or whatever you think was a time of molding, inner spiritual molding for him. Most of you know that after Jesus was baptized, before he did anything, what did he do? He went out into the wilderness for 40 days, no bread, no meat.
No spam.
No spam. You know, I feel sorry for first century people because they didn't have it. But anyway, no food. Why did he do that? Well, the text doesn't say. The text tells us that during that time he was tempted by the devil, but that's not why he went there. He went there because both he and the Father knew all of the things that Jesus was going to do during his ministry. Some of them would be fun, some of them would be wonderful, and some of them would be devastating. And God wanted his son to have an extra close bond with him that he felt like could only be accomplished in solitude. I used to have times of solitude in my life, but I don't much anymore. I admit it. Paul is better at that than I am. But the only times that I ever intentionally have that is after I drop someone off at the airport and I'm on my way home. And instead of listening to my book, which I usually do, I go, okay, God, I'll turn the book off. Let's talk. With another 5,000 cars in the road, it's not exactly what you'd call solitude. But it is in a very real sense for me, an alone time with God. I had a friend in ministry, it's been a long time ago now, probably 25, 30 years. Is that possible? He got invited to go to a monastery in New Mexico for a week where no one spoke. Nada. When they gave thanks, they bowed their head and gave thanks. Nobody said anything. My wife would probably tell you I'd go stark raving crazy in a place like that. I don't know how he did it. But he talked about some of the things that were changed in his life because of that. A week. You got up, you ate, you went to your room, you went to a place where the people gathered in silent prayer for an hour, back to your room, back to eat, back to your room, don't say anything. No earpods. Wow. Well, I believe that Elijah's time in the wilderness was more for that purpose than it was for being afraid of what Ahab might have done to him. That's what I would say anyway. Now, God has a different idea. The brook dried up. Everyone understands why the brook dried up, because Elijah hasn't said it's going to rain yet. So naturally, 3.5 years it turns out to be. 3.5 years. No rain. Can you imagine what that did to the country? Wow. The brook quit. So the word of the Lord comes to Elijah again. Let's read, beginning in verse 7. Sometime later, doesn't say how long, the brook dried up, because there had been no rain in the land. Then the word of the Lord came to him. Go at once to Zarephath of Sidon and stay there. I have commanded a widow in that place to supply you with food. So he went to Zarephath. When he came to the town gate, a widow was there gathering sticks. He called to her and asked, would you give me a little water in a jar so that I could have a drink? As she was going to get it, he called, wait, and bring me, please, a piece of bread. As surely as the Lord your God lives, I don't have any bread. Only a handful of flour in a jar and a little oil in a jug. I am gathering a few sticks to take home and make a meal for myself and my son, that we may eat it and die. Elijah said to her, don't be afraid. Go home and do as you have said. But first, make a small cake of bread for me from what you have and bring it to me. And then make something for yourself and for your son. For this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. The jar of flour will not be used up, and the jug of oil will not run dry until the day the Lord gives rain on the land. So God says, you got no water here, so you're going to have to move. You should go to Zarephath, which is very near Sidon. Do you remember who's from Sidon? You get a gold star if you remember who's from Sidon. This is the same class I had last week, right? I just want to check.
Jezebel?
Jezebel. Her dad is either priest or king or both of Sidon. So I'm supposed to go to Jezebel's place? Yep, that's where I want you to go. And when you get there, you'll find a widow. And whereas the ravens took care of you before, this widow is going to take care of you. Now, in that day, widows were generally understood to be the poorest of the classes. It's not like you could go to work at Macy's. You with me? They had no one to take care of them. She had a boy, but he's clearly a boy. Someone that she can carry like this. So he can't help her. And clearly, if widows in general are the poorest of poor classes, then this woman qualified. When Elijah says, "Hey, would you get me a drink?" She said, "Yeah, I can. By the way, was she wearing a button that said, "I'm a widow"? I mean, I don't know. It said, he saw a widow there. Or maybe widows wore a certain color shawl. I don't know. But he saw a widow there. "I need a drink. Can you give me a drink?" She went to get him a drink. "Oh, and by the way, if you could bring me a piece of bread with that, I'd really appreciate it." And she said, "Bread? I got no bread. In fact, these sticks that I'm gathering up, I'm gathering to make a fire to put the little bit of flour and a little bit of oil mixed together and to make our last meal. And then the boy and I are just going to lay over and die." That's called destitute, people. She was down to her last meal and saw no way of getting any food after that. I don't think she was just down. I think she was realistic. There'd been a famine for 3.5 years, for Pete's sake, and it had reached up into Sidon as well. So yeah, she's in bad shape. And I'm making this up, but I can just almost hear Elijah saying, "I walked 75 miles for this. This widow's going to take care of me, and she doesn't even have any bread." Do you have any rich widow friends? So, after she's told him she's just going to die, he says, "By the way, before you die, could you give me a piece of bread? Could you do that oil and flour thing, mix it together, and make a piece for me first? And then you and your boy can have what..." That's almost embarrassing. It almost sounds like something I do, I mean, it's that bad. "Oh, it's your last meal. Well, just give me some of it. Because if you're going to die anyway, what's the difference how much you eat?" And then he says, "Don't be afraid." Some of you know this. The command most often heard in Scripture is that one. Don't be afraid, or fear not, as it sometimes appears. Why? Because, he said, that little jar with the flour, you're always going to find flour in there. And that jar with the with the oil, vase maybe, you'll always have oil in there. Now, don't get the impression that she found this giant bin to keep the flour in and this giant vase or jar to keep the... No. It was still in the little ones. But every time she put her hand in there, lo and behold, there's still flour in there. I could have sworn I got the last of it. No, God provided a miracle. It reminds me of the feeding of the 5,000. I thought there were 5 little fish and... No, what? 2 fish. 5 loaves and 2 fish. Where's all this food coming from? It's coming from a miracle that God is performing right in the presence of the people who are there. And that's exactly what's going on here. I am going to guess that the first time she went back to that jar, after emptying it, she thought, this ain't going to work. There is flour in there. And she would have enough flour for her to make food. The text does not explain why she didn't just go to Applebee's if she was hungry. People who were destitute didn't have options. I mean, flour and oil, don't get any ideas about making that for us. Right? Flour and oil. But it's enough to sustain life. And I was reminded, we noticed this when we studied the Sermon on the Mount, when Jesus taught his disciples to pray, and one of the things he told them was, give us this day our daily bread. Not, give us this day gift cards to the Outback. Daily bread. Well, you know, but that's just a little model prayer. No, it's not. It's a way of the Lord saying to us, we need to develop a dependence upon God to care for us. Just as he cared for Elijah at the brook, just as he cared for Elijah when he went to the very destitute widow's house, that's what he expects from us. That kind of dependence. Give us this day our daily bread. By the way, notice that she references your God, as surely as the Lord your God lives. She's not a Yahweh worshiper. She's a pagan. But somehow she knows that Elijah is from Israel, and his God is Jehovah or Yahweh, and therefore she says, as surely as the Lord lives, and so forth. She recognizes the God of Elijah. Oh, by the way, some of you probably remember this. After Jesus came back from the desert, he went to his hometown of Nazareth. Y'all remember that? Mm-hmm. And at first they thought, boy, this boy's a preacher. You know, he's good. But then he wouldn't leave well enough alone. And one of the things he said was, paraphrasing, you know, there were a lot of widows in Elijah's day. But the only one who got help from God was the foreigner up there in, Phoenicia. Guess what? They didn't like that. And that's when they decided they were going to put him to death. But he passed among them. I don't know how that happened. But anyway, the warning in Luke 4 is, you think you know where God's doing his stuff? No, God has outreaches to here and there. And obviously, he does here. This poor widow of Zarephath is being given food by God until when? Until the rain starts again. That's what he says. Till the rain starts again. Now, one last section. You're right, Paul. We almost are going to be finished early. 17. Sometime later, the son of the woman who owned the house became ill. He grew worse and worse, and finally stopped breathing. She said to Elijah, what do you have against me, man of God? Did you come to remind me of my sin and kill my son? Give me your son, Elijah replied, and he took him from her arms, carried him to the upper room where he was staying, and laid him on his bed. And then he cried out to the Lord, O Lord my God, have you brought tragedy also upon this widow I am staying with by causing her son to die? Then he stretched himself out on the boy 3 times and cried to the Lord, "O Lord my God, let this boy's life return to him." The Lord heard Elijah's cry, and the boy's life returned to him, and he lived. Elijah picked up the child and carried him down from the room into the house. He gave him to his mother and said, "Look, your son is alive." And then the woman said to Elijah, "Now I know that you are a man of God, and the word of the Lord from your mouth is the truth." So we've seen Elijah before Ahab. We've seen him at the brook getting fed by the ravens. We've seen him go to Zarephath, and then we've seen him perform this participating in this unbelievable miracle. It's really kind of 4 different things that are laid out. And the thing I want to remind you about again is that God didn't tell him ahead of time at all. He didn't say, "Yeah, after you go to the ravine, then I'm going to send you to Zarephath, and then you're going to find a widow, and then you're going to heal her." No. It used to frustrate me sometimes when my life was not going anywhere. "God, could you show me a 10-year plan?" Anybody ever wish that? Could you just kind of let me know what it's... if he'd let me know I was going to find Paula, I could have handled all the other stuff without just being in the dumper all the time. But no, he didn't tell me anything about her or Frisco or a lot of the things that I could mention. It was just one thing at a time. And that's how he does with you, right? You didn't know 20 years ago that you'd be living here and listen to some guy rant from the front of the room. If God had told you that, you'd have said, maybe we should move somewhere else. But I don't know. But that's the way the Lord does it. He leads us into a time of our life without letting us know what's going to be on the other side. And there was a time when I thought, that'd be good if you could do that. And then a friend of mine pointed out to me that that's not so true. When I was in my very first church, I was 26 years old, I believe. Yeah, I was. My best friend in the church was a 23-year-old young man. He worked as the butcher in his father's grocery. Went out to feed the dogs one day and didn't come in until his wife went out and found him stone cold dead by the dogs and tree. Heart attack. 23. And my friend said to me, "How would you like to have known that 2 years ago?" That would have ruined every moment I had with him. Because all I would have been thinking about is, he's going to die. So God shows us our life, one event at a time, and says, just you and I can handle this, whatever it is. And on that occasion, we did. It wasn't easy, but we did. He was my best friend at the time. Now, okay. Let me see where I am. I guess I could say that there are very few lives that are not touched deeply by tragedy, especially when you get to our age. I know you're tired of me saying this, but I have lost 4 dear friends over the last 5 or 6 years. Just each one just nearly killed my soul. For you that knew him, Jerry Perry may have been the worst. Paul and I sometimes commiserate together. We still miss him. Such a great guy. So much fun to be around, and then taken from us. I didn't see that coming. Neither did I with the other 3 guys who were so close to me. Some of you here have lost children. This woman thought that's exactly what happened to her. And you can imagine how devastated she would be by the loss of her only son. But more so in that time for a widow. Because what she's counting on is that this little boy will grow up into manhood, find a wife, have a family, and take care of her. Because that's what families did back then. They didn't have senior living. Senior living was your kids and grandkids taking care of you. And now she thought she no longer had any hope for that. And where Elijah comes up with this, maybe some of you can come and tell me later. Give me the boy. She hands him over, and Elijah walks upstairs carrying this boy, and he lays him on the bed. And he thinks, maybe if I ask God, he can come back to life. Where did he get that idea? There is no record in Scripture of any person ever being resuscitated. I use resuscitated instead of resurrected. Do you know why? Because when they're resurrected, they're not going to die again. When they're resuscitated, they're still going to die, but later. But where he got the idea, and where he got the idea for the methodology, I have no idea. It says that he laid himself on top of the boy and prayed. And how many times? 3 times. 3rd time's a charm, apparently. Why does it have to be 3? I don't know. But the text says that God heard his prayer, and he gave that life back to the boy, and he started breathing again. And I'm going to tell you, the guy most shocked by that was Elijah. It worked. It worked. And he took the boy, now alive, breathing again, and restored him to his mother. I can't tell you how many times there have been in my ministry when I could have done that for a mother. Because there's nothing quite like that. The mother was both shocked and overjoyed by what had transpired. And she says that life coming from death persuaded her to accept the Word of God and the messenger of God. Now I know, she said. Now I'm positive now that you're from God. What? The flour and the oil weren't enough? Well, the flour and the oil are nice. But this is different, isn't it? Having a child come back that you thought you had lost. Now, I'm done, except, I want to make one further point, and it doesn't exactly come from the text, but in a way it does. There is such reason for her to be overjoyed that her son was dead and now is alive again. But do you know that the New Testament describes in almost identical language what happens to a person who decides to become a follower of Christ? In Romans 6, when Paul describes what baptism is about, he says they are buried with Christ and they rise to walk in what? Newness of life. That which was dead is now alive. And my favorite one is in Romans 6:13, where Paul describes Christians as, listen, those who have been brought from death to life. And so, if this miracle seems so out there, if you're a follower of Jesus Christ, you've had that miracle in your life already. Now, you may not have appreciated it as much, but you should have. Those who have been brought from death to life by their decision to make Jesus Lord of their life. And that's all I have to say about that. Don't forget. You don't have to make fun of people who eat Spam, and you don't have to make fun of people who vote a certain way. I'm going to try to do better. Paula, you really need to clean up your act. You know that's not true.